Hi, Jonathan York, Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. Now we've pretty much seen most of the earnings coming out of the US, which certainly was probably better than anticipated on about sort of 80% of the companies reporting. Inflation data also at the end of last week was always encouraging as well. It was sort of below 5%, both on the CPI and also the PPI was showing sort of signs of sort of falling as well. So now all eyes really turning to the debt ceiling, and there's still sort of stalemate on that. Republicans are still playing hardball. And, as sort of discussed before, I think, certainly some of the new Republicans coming in, trying to make a bit of a name for themselves, but really don't understand the full implications if they don't get that debt ceiling sorted out. And what is quite interesting as well, you're starting to see some of those sort of longer term interest rates just nudge up a little bit. 10 years back above 350 at 354. And also the 2-year as well is back above that 4% now. It's 408 currently trading. But still well off recent highs. The 10-year was well above 4% and the 2-year was well above 5%. Now, also, the debate is still ongoing in the US as to whether the Fed is now done. Most people anticipate probably one further sort of quarter point hike at the next meeting, and then certainly on pause for the next sort of 3 to 4 months. But what is quite interesting is that the interest rate curve is starting to price in rate cuts now towards the end of the year, and certainly 2024 will see some pretty major cuts in US interest rates. Also quite interesting as well, First Citizens Bank, which purchased SVB after it ran into difficulties, they have seen a gain of just over $9 billion since purchase, which just goes to show once confidence is restored in a bank, how it can pretty quickly improve. Now oil is sort of pivoting around that sort of $70 and just trading just over there and change. Now GDP in the UK, although it was slightly negative for March, it's still showing just a 0.1 gain over the first quarter. So potentially as well, the UK will avoid recession, which was pretty well forecast from the Bank of England back last September. Also as well, in a major development, the UK has committed further aid to Ukraine in terms of long-range missiles and drones. Much to the annoyance of Russia. Because certainly the Ukraine-Russian war is still sort of in full swing, and Kyiv being bombarded pretty much on a nightly basis now with heavy artillery and bombings. Although interestingly, in the south, around Bakhmut, the Russian troops are coming under increased pressure, and indeed certain reports are now forecasting that they are sort of losing ground there, but also as well that many of the Russian forces are actually leaving and deserting their posts. Now, certainly in Europe, it is that Ukraine support, which is really sort of focal point in many countries, because really they're spending a lot of money out there, and with further issues at home in terms of sort of cost of living issues, etc., in the various countries, it's starting to lose a little bit of support out there for continuing to supply financial aid to Ukraine. Now, if you were cynical, you were saying that this is what Putin wants, just sort of drag it out as long as possible and just win the war of attrition. Now in Australia, and after the budget looking like it's going to be in surplus now, that'll be the first time in 15 years. And the first time a Labor government has had a surplus since Paul Keating in 1989 to 1990. So certainly a pretty major achievement, and Albanese will really be trying to drive that point home that his government is sort of fiscally responsible and able to run the country in a sort of sensible way. And certainly if you look at the Australian economy, it looks in pretty reasonable shape. The Reserve Bank has been pretty conservative in its rate hikes. Potentially there's one further rate hike in the sort of pipeline, but the economy is sort of pushing on at a pretty reasonable rate. You've got a housing market that looks like it's sort of plateaued and bottomed out now and starting to increase. You've got increased tourists coming through, but also as well net migrations are up in Australia as well, which obviously all should be good for the economy. But also as well, obviously the other major sort of boost has been the sort of thawing of the tension between Australia and China. And indeed, headway is now being made in terms of getting those sort of trading routes back up and running. Now here in New Zealand, interesting on the net migration numbers, because if you look at about 12 months ago, it was down around 22,000. So 22,000 New Zealanders were leaving New Zealand. Fast forward 12 months now, and that figure has sort of swung around pretty dramatically. And on the latest data now, it looks like about plus 62,000 coming into New Zealand. Now that obviously should be pretty good for the economy in terms of, they have to live somewhere, they've got to be working, spending money, etc. But also potentially it does pose some inflationary threats as well. And with the Reserve Bank due to meet later this month, most anticipate that the OCR will go up by another 25 basis points to 550. Now, retail spending for April was up 0.7, but if you actually look a little bit further under the hood on those numbers, it's not really an increase in spending, it's just the fact that prices are higher. So in terms of monetary values, you're seeing an increase in spending, but in terms of actually sort of items being sold and the sort of purchase, etc., they're falling. Now, obviously, all eyes will be on the budget this week, and sort of quite interesting because in recent pay negotiations, the government was telling the nurses, the teachers, etc., there was no further money. But then Grant Robertson, the finance minister, comes out at the beginning of the week now and says, actually, we managed to find $4 billion from savings within the government. Which has obviously drawn quite a bit of criticism from the opposition parties, because it just seems a little bit sort of too coincidental coming into the budget in an election year that miraculously we managed to find $4 billion. But also as well, obviously the government will be facing a further major headache because in June the petrol subsidy comes off, and that 25 cents goes back onto a litre of fuel. So if you are looking for income options, go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.